Hello, I am going to talk about the golden ratio and how to find the actual value of the golden ratio. One definition of the golden ratio is making a fraction. You have a stick or a line, cut it into two pieces, make a fraction with the long piece length over the short piece length, and that should be equal to the fraction of the full length to the long piece length, full length divided by long part length. So I've created some variables here to help us do that. So in my situation, I said x is the length of the long piece, y is the length of the short piece. So x plus y would be the total length of the piece. Now, if you're going to make a fraction of long to short, that would be x over y. And then if you're going to make a fraction of total length to long, that's x plus y on top and y on bottom. So those are my two fractions I have there. The next line down is what you get if you do the cross product from that fraction. So top left times bottom right and top right times bottom left gives me that bottom line on this slide, which is that x squared equals y times the quantity x plus y. That's now the top line here. Now distributing that y, we get x squared equals y squared plus xy. And we can do some rearranging to get all of the variables on one side. So x squared minus xy minus y squared equals 0. I'm again going to create a new variable here. One more step before I do that, sorry. I now divide by y squared on both sides of the equation. And when you do that on the left side, you have to divide all the pieces by y squared. So that first term becomes x squared over y squared. The second term becomes negative x over y. And the last term becomes negative 1. Because if you do y squared over y squared, you get 1. And that equals 0 because 0 divided by y squared would be 0. This is, of course, requiring that y can't be 0, which y is a length, so y would not be 0 or negative. Now I introduce a new variable. U is going to be the variable of x over y. And when you do that, that x squared over y squared just becomes a u squared. The x over y becomes a u, and now we've got a new equation. U squared minus u minus 1 equals 0, and that's a quadratic. We can solve that with a quadratic equation. So I start with that equation, u squared minus u minus 1 equals 0. B squared minus 4ac, remember, is the part of the quadratic formula that's underneath the square root. So I put that part first, and when you plug those in, you get the number 5. So we're going to have a square root of 5, which is great because that's going to mean that it is an irrational number, and that's great because the golden ratio is an irrational number. When we plug that in to the quadratic equation, remember there's the negative b plus or minus. So we can either get 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2 or 1 minus the square root of 5 over 2. And when you do those two in a calculator, for the 1 plus, you get 1.618, which is the value of the golden ratio we expected. And for the 1 minus the square root of 5 over 2, you get a negative number, which wouldn't make sense because x over y is a fraction of two lengths. So we can kind of ignore that, but notice that it does still have 0.618 involved, which is part of the golden ratio. So finally, just remember that u means x over y, and since x is the long piece length and y is the short piece length, we have found the golden ratio. That since u is x over y and x over y is the golden ratio, that is 1.618.